Welcome to Atlanta's Commercial Real Estate Show, brought to you by Bull Realty, the show for property owners and business leaders. Host Michael Bull brings you market analysis, advice, and opportunities around Atlanta.
Thank you for joining us. I am Michael Bull. Well, today we're going to talk about senior housing, and we have a guest in our studio, Huntley Gordon. He's president with New South Construction. Huntley, thanks for being with us here in Studio One.
Good morning, Michael, and welcome to be here.
So, senior housing seems to be interesting to a lot of people and a lot of developers. I think a lot of baby boomers have parents going into senior housing. We saw it seems like the business is kind of ticking up right now. So, when you look at Atlanta, Huntley, what do you see about Atlanta that makes Atlanta maybe a favorable location for senior housing type of projects?
Well, I think collectively, Atlanta is a market right now that is under a lot of acceleration. There's a lot of activity going on. There's, if you look at the population increases that are occurring, there's a robust angle and aspect that's happening to all of us, developers, designers, contractors, that we're seeing as an end result. It also provides a year-round ability to work. We don't have different seasons where we virtually have to shut down or go under different bases of construction. The subcontractor market in Atlanta in particular, I think, is very strong. It's obviously because there's a lot of projects, people worry about how spread out is it. But you do have the opportunity to reach out to the submarket goal, whereas if you go into some submarkets, you don't have as many subcontractors. No different as somebody's looking at an angle, how many bids or quotes can I get? Mm-hmm. Well, for us, it's really about how many qualified bids and quotes can we get to make sure that the product is what we want to see.
Right. And as you guys are looking at these new projects, what are some of the design trends you're seeing? It seems like technology is changing fast. What's changing in the way these projects look?
Well, I think the nice thing that's exciting about assisted living is that from 10, 15 years ago, people may not have been excited about it. It was, are people being, are they moving from their traditional home into a hotel type scenario? And what we're seeing, even from the contractor side, is the excitement when people are coming into these spaces, is the talent of the developers and the architects, the way that they have changed the dynamics of this destination spot, is that they are creating opportunities for these people to come out of their homes and still have life.
Right.
Social interaction. They can get into the different components that involve fitness, IT development, where they can continue to interact with people that they want to talk to and all that. So what we're seeing, it's interesting when you walk through the doors, and we're seeing teaching kitchens where people can gather around a teaching kitchen. Now that kitchen can also be utilized for other things. You've got pre-function spaces. We created one up on the north side of town where you have a roll-up bar that whether you're somebody who wants to stand at a bar or you're sitting in a chair or something like that, you can have a pre-function, so to speak, interaction before you go to dinner or do something else with your collective friends or family that you're entertaining. The other thing is, how many times 10, 15 years ago when people got invited to an assisted living type complex did you want to go? Okay, right. So now the places are actually where you go and you enjoy the dinner and the food because they've ramped up the kitchens, the service, and that aspect. So we're seeing from a general contractor the infrastructure that goes into these facilities, and it really has changed. So with independent living, assisted living, and memory care, there are different dynamics with each one of them that are being interjected into this market, and I think that's great for the consumer.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I hadn't thought about that point that you brought up about being invited, and because I would never wanted to go, I don't think, unless I was trying to just be nice to someone. But yeah, I just we've been involved in development and land projects for senior housing, and they're very nice, they're very pleasant, and my mother's in one, and I go see her, and it's really, the people are great, the facility is great, and it is welcome, and the food is good.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So you're on the construction side. I think everybody's concerned about construction costs rising. What are you seeing?
Well, we all are, and the hard part is if we priced a project with a developer on the conceptual level a year ago, what is the actual eventual contract amount going to be in today's dollars or in dollars to come this summer or the latter part of the year?
Yeah.
So we looked at a whole series of trends, and when we're dealing with the composition of the building, you've got concrete, steel, and lumber. Those are some of the major factors that we all look at and that drive right now. Drywall, as an example, has been relatively flat in terms of material, but the labor cost has come up. So what we're seeing is on the different models of the construction models versus the material indexes is that we've seen probably year to date about 5 to 6% increases.
In 1 year.
In 1 year.
Yeah.
So if you take that as a bottom line, let's say that you're building an assisted living complex that is a wood frame structure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, wood lumber in general spiked back in January, February, and March.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, you have 10% or so of costs that increase.
Yeah.
Whereas concrete has not increased as much. So we're dealing with those aspects that we have to relate back to when we sit down as a team.
Yeah,
with the
yeah,
developer.
that's a good point. Well, stay with us. We'll have more on Atlanta, assisted living and senior living. Stay with us. The Commercial Real Estate Show is brought to you in part by your friends at Bull Realty. When your business requires proven performance, visit bullrealty.com or call 800-408-BULL. Thank you for joining us. Well, today we are talking about assisted living around Atlanta. My guest is Huntley Gordon. He's president of New South Construction. And Huntley, what are some tips for developers and investors related to senior housing and construction today?
Well, I think as we sit down, it's know your partners. One of the tips I would give a developer is to, obviously as they're really focused in on location, what can they do to have their team really help them with their performa, developing their whole model and understanding the capabilities of the architect and in terms of their design capabilities with the interior components and the mechanical, electrical, and the civil trades is very important, because if you integrate that with the knowledge of a general contractor, there's a lot of things that can be explored. So you get into the different price dynamics in terms of what is the structure. Is it a steel frame structure, concrete, or wood frame type structure? What type elements do you get into with the utility components, meaning the site infrastructure? Because these are big dollar equations that you set the precedence at the beginning of a project. So if you sit down and throw it all out on the table, I kind of call it why don't we just sit down and have a round table to discuss what the goals of the project are before you really start putting ink to paper, and you can really solve a lot of issues that potentially do come up down the road. And I think that's important. One of the things that we're doing from our angle, as well as with the designers, is the virtual reality realm of, we call it VDC, virtual design construction, or BIM, that a lot of people have heard, in which you challenge the building information modeling component. And so the key there, you go to the end result. Can you build this before you actually build it?
Right.
So if you do that, how many times have people been able to build things a second time? Well, they get it right most of the time. They really improve upon it. So the goals there are that we can flush out idiosyncrasies, coordination aspects. The other component I think is really important is that the developer gets to see a finished product, so to speak, in animation, that they can really kind of test that envelope and walk through their building and say, this is the brand that we're selling.
Yeah.
So we can explore exterior type ideas of brick and siding and stucco and the cost elements with that, and really sit down and get down into the nuts and bolts of a project. And so you really dig into the capabilities and what the different firms can offer in terms of their experience that they bring to the table.
Yeah, well, that's excellent. And I like your idea of not having your professionals in silos. Get them together and see what everybody can bring to the table. And then on the virtual reality, one of the things there that I found is interesting, like when we built out our office space, is once it started coming together near the end, then I looked around and said, no, this is going to have to be stainless, and this is going to be this, and because I didn't have that VR experience.
That's right.
And I think if I'd had that, I'd have known right then, no, we got to change this now. And then you get to the changes and everything costs, so that can be a big benefit, right?
It's an automatic impact. I mean, they went through the transition where, I remember 15, 20 years ago, we did a lot of explaining, whereas now somebody can visually see it in 3 dimensions. That's a whole game changer from 2 dimensions to 3 dimensions. Doesn't matter whether you're the developer or whether you're the client. It helps everybody to be on the same page. We can sit down with a subcontractor and take one of these models and spin it all the way around and discuss every one of the elevations.
Yeah.
And it kind of takes out the, well, I didn't know about that
Right.
aspect.
Right.
Well, that's the goal,
Right.
because if you know about it ahead of time, you're probably going to prepare for it.
Yeah.
In a much better context.
Yeah,
So,
and I think most people would realize that, when you get into this BIM and these kind of systems, that you can really avoid mistakes and
right.
control costs. But the other thing that you kind of touched on there is also kind of the marketing of it. So speaking of not being siloed, now kind of the marketing folks are kind of at that table as well, and they can use that virtual reality to start leasing.
That's right. So there's different elements. We can create some example rooms that people can walk through, but usually that means the rest of the development isn't done yet. But if they have this virtual reality, they can show a complete model of what the whole grounds included, because they'll even take a drone, sort of like a feature of a drone, and walk through the model so somebody can see, what is the landscaping going to be like, what's the whole experience of coming and going from this facility, is all the way down to what does my room look like.
Right. And that's important, because the time to stabilize these properties, if you can bring that down from 2 years to 1 or 3 years to 2, or hey, maybe you stabilize it pretty quickly if you can start leasing, a year or 2 in advance.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's an exciting transition in our industry. It really is, and stuff, because it really puts a lot of people at the table rather than the old traditional approach of a developer finds a designer, the designer designs it, and then they get a price.
Right.
And sometimes they get sticker shock when that happens.
Right.
Whereas this way, they can build it all together, and they can really control the whole vested interest of the project from day one all the way to the end.
Yeah, it makes sense. And one of the things I think that a lot of people are seeing that live around Atlanta is a lot of cranes, a lot of those big birds, those big cranes around. So I want to ask you about that and about the volume of construction and what's that doing to kind of everybody that needs construction in their business today. So stay with us. I'm Michael Bull. This is Atlanta's Commercial Real Estate Show. We'll be right back.
Raise the value of your commercial real estate project by telling your story to a national TV audience. CRE Groundbreakers, a new branded content series coming to TV this fall. Details at barnescreativestudios.com.
Welcome back. Today we're talking construction with Huntley Gordon, president of New South Construction. And Huntley, as we drive around Atlanta these days, we're seeing a lot of these big birds called cranes. I was down 75, 85 the other day, and I think I looked around at one view, saw like 11 or 12 cranes. What's that doing to the construction industry today around Atlanta?
Well, it's obviously it's a sign that just says it's exploding in all different directions, because it's not just at the airport or in Midtown. It's also up in areas like Sandy Springs. And so you see these different markets and these enclaves where, I think, tying back to assisted living, there's a lot of different opportunities in different regions besides just Metro Atlanta to really build and have this dynamic energy that Atlanta is.
And you're just finishing 2 projects, and where were they?
So we're finishing projects that are in St. Simon's Island, as well as in Reynolds Plantation, a couple here in Atlanta that are associated with assisted living, but also playing in the other markets. Atlanta sees the 2 stadiums that are going on. The airport has an enormous budget over the next 5 to 6 years, in which, being one of the top airports in the world, the expansion is huge. So there's, between the industrial, commercial, as well as the residential scale of things that are happening around this town, it's hitting on all cylinders. That has its pros and it has its cons.
Yeah.
Well, there's a certain amount of people that are here and available that can help build these. So as a general contractor, one of our big aspects is the subcontractor and vendor market, because there are a lot of wonderful firms out there that you collectively want to work with that have the experience and the ability to do the right kind of job that you assign to them. So that's very important, and those relationships are, in my world, is really the heart and soul of what we're about.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the big keys of working with you guys, that you have those kinds of relationships, and we've heard some stories in the past few years where people would have subs that just kind of walked off the job because they're getting paid more somewhere else. You still seen any of that?
Well, I think
nonsense.
I think it really expands into the labor as well. You had carpenters that were coming in and they were getting paid $15 an hour and stuff, and then they could get $20 or $24 an hour. And when these projects were going, they needed the workforce because there are schedules that are driven and they have to get the project done. So sometimes people were doing that. So that resulted in folks that did transition. But all in all, your high quality subcontractors, they're when they tell you they're going to do something, they do it.
Yeah.
And if you pre-plan things out in front and they know what they're up against, you really have a pretty strong relationship.
Well, while you're here, I want to ask you about the Braves project, because a lot of people understand the Braves project, the new stadium there, the SunTrust Stadium, and you guys were involved in that. That was a pretty big undertaking. A lot of companies involved, right?
It was. There were 4 general contractors involved, and it ended up being a wonderful team. It wasn't 4 contractors pitted against each other. It was 4 contractors that took all their hats off and put one hat on, and the common goal was to see the success of the stadium, which happened, and that was important. It was a lot of fun. But it was at the beginning basis when Atlanta was starting to roll out of a dormant economy, so to speak, from the construction angle, because you didn't see all those cranes tying back all around, and then all of a sudden you see 5, 6
When was
cranes.
that started? Like 3?
Well, it was interesting. Atlanta was slower to, I think, digress into the economy back when 2008 hit. We all had a lot of backlog for a year to 2 years, so we saw work going into 2010, and then things really started to slow. Architectural firms and contractors, there were numbers of 30, 40, 50% in terms of, basically things decreasing, or even your own staffing that was decreasing. So we started to see things come out in 2013, 2014. It was slow.
And when did the Braves Stadium break ground, that project?
It broke down roughly 2 years ago. If people remember the announcement, the goal was that by April, and that date was not going to change.
Yeah.
So
how many people were working at one time there in some cases?
Oh gosh, you got well over 1,000 folks, and then you take the whole battery and you take the multifamily component. It was probably on the upside of getting close to 1,500 to 2,000.
So did you have a traffic controller there? What'd you have?
Oh, everybody did, and it was I remember at the end, a couple of days before the stadium was opening, it was just getting everything cleaned up and ready. And stuff, and there was still growth happening. There were restaurants being built, and more of the service aspect that needed to come online.
Yeah.
What they were able to do in the planning and the push was just absolutely phenomenal. It took one heck of a large team and a lot of bright individuals that really worked hard. I mean, they were working 6, 7 days a week and long hours, and got to hand it to the multitude of people that really put that together.
Yeah, that's an incredible project, and I love it. It's a nice project. The stadium's fantastic. If you're listening and you haven't been to the Braves Stadium yet, you got to go. It's a really different experience. It's really fun, and you're talking about one of the sayings I've seen when we're involved in construction. It's easy to build something, but it's hard to finish it, right? And Alec, thanks for being on the show. We appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you very much. Enjoyed it.
And if you'd like more information from Huntley, check their website out, New South Construction. And thanks for being with us on Atlanta's Commercial Real Estate Show.